Hi, I'm Michael Davy, owner of Michael Davy Theatrical Cosmetics. I began making plastic bald caps for Bob Kelly in New York back in the 80s. They were used mostly on Saturday Night Live at that time, but as word of these caps spread, I began selling to Name's Beauty Supply in Hollywood, and now they're sold all over, including Reynolds Advanced Materials, Nigel's in Hollywood, Jourdain in Toronto, Hub in Melbourne, Screenface and Guru in London. Just about anywhere professional quality makeup supplies are needed. These caps were applied with standard adhesives, and the edges are blended with acetone for an imperceptible blend to the skin, which is essential for television and film use. Now, with the advent of Water-Melon, we offer caps that can be applied with alcohol, no adhesive, and the edges can be blended with the same 99% isopropyl or ethanol alcohol. Although I consider these caps a medium-duty cap, they are quite appropriate for most bald cap situations short of playing football. Today's tutorial highlights the application of the Water-Melon bald cap. We will focus on flattening the hair, the application technique using alcohol, the blending of edges with alcohol, and stipple coat of liquid watermelon. We will cover the application of foundation and using AGPC airbrush foundation in a further video. Our model today is my friend Mitch Hyman. This footage was taken back in early 2001 when Water-Melon bald caps were first developed, but the information is still just as relevant today as it was then. The first step is to clean the skin with Sweat Stop. Clean the forehead, sides, and nape area with the Sweat Stop. Sweat Stop is a topical antiperspirant used like an astringent. It's not a sealer, but a topical antiperspirant. You can also apply the Sweat Stop up into the hairline, as sweat under a bald cap usually comes from the top of the head as well as the forehead or nape where it's attached. In addition to its antiperspirant action, which accumulates with repeated applications, cleaning the skin is essential for good adhesion. The next step is to flatten the hair. Plastic bald caps are very thin, and if the hair is not flat beneath the cap, your actor may look like a comedic butthead alien with a huge-looking skull instead of a realistic bald head. Yes, applying a bald cap is a theatrical trick to make an actor with hair look bald when the alternative is for him or her to shave their head. Since this is essentially a trick, it usually requires the cooperation between the actor, makeup artist, costumer, and director to convincingly portray a bald person. So if the actor can cooperate by trimming his hair as short as possible, the makeup artist can better hide it under the cap. Since many hair gels contain alcohol, which would conflict with the cap, I've developed a non-alcohol hair gel suitable for use with the alcohol-soluble Water-Melon bald cap. We apply my non-alcohol hair gel to the hair. We can comb this into thicker hair or just applying it to thinner hair with the spatula. Try to lay the hair down away from any edges, which means to lay it back at the front of the head and lay it upward around the ears. In our case, the subject has trimmed hair around the ears, so laying it flat is easier than if the subject did not trim his or her hair. The ears are usually one of the more difficult areas to make look convincing, so having the hair away from the ear is essential in the application. So if your subject has longer hair in this area, you will need to comb it upward away from the ear and apply the hair gel. Then, hold it in place as it dries with a blow dryer. The gel must be completely dry before the bald cap is applied, and since most gels use alcohol as the drying agent and ours is water-based, it will take longer to dry, so speed up the application. You can microwave the hair gel so that it's warm and will dry faster. For the rear of the head, the hair can be crossed and laid down, but again, it will be much easier and more convincing if the subject can trim his hair so that it will not interfere with the application. Obviously, a female with longer hair may not want to cut her hair very short, and in this case, there will need to be more cooperation between the makeup artist, actor, costumer, and director. The makeup artist will need to leave the longer hair extend below the nape of the cap in the back, and this area will need to be concealed by the costumer with a high collar and by the director with appropriate blocking and/or lighting. Once the gel is applied, you can smooth the hair before the gel dries completely. As you do this, you will be able to feel it become dry in areas and still wet in others. The use of a blow dryer will significantly speed up the process. Use one hand to hold and flatten the hair, while the other directs the dryer. Hold the dryer far enough away from the subject so as not to become too hot. You can use the hand flattening the hair to tell if it's becoming too hot. Also, ask your subject to tell you if anything becomes uncomfortable. Be sure to talk with your subject, as this is a collaborative team effort, and talking will put them at ease and let them feel more part of the process. Flattening is time-consuming, but it is one of the steps that is often overlooked or avoided, but essential to a convincing bald cap application. You will be able to tell when the gel is dry as it becomes hard and rigid. The drier it is, the harder it will become. With thicker hair, you will need to be careful so that the top layer is dry and hard, but the hair underneath is still wet gel. Once the cap is applied, the hair gel will not dry. Take your time and be sure that the gel is completely dry. Try to ensure that you have a clean area around the ear to apply the cap to. You will want to apply the cap to the scalp and not to the hair, so be sure to lay the hair upward away from the ear as much as possible. Once the hair gel is dry and hard, you can tap on it to be sure. The next step is to test fit the bald cap. You may want to warm a cold cap up with a blow dryer so that it stretches easier without tearing. Hold the cap in the front part with one hand and pull it over the head with the other. These caps are made with excess material, so it will need to be trimmed to fit. Pull it down snugly over your subject's head, and it may extend down over their face a bit. Let them know not to worry, as this will be removed in the process, and to close their eyes for the rest of the process or until told that they can open them. Pull down snugly to both sides of the cap by the ears so that it's smooth on the top with no wrinkles. Be sure the cap is centered as possible on the head. With a marker, place a spot where the ear meets the head on the cap. This will mark where you will cut the ear out, and to do this on both sides. Also, mark a spot in the middle of the forehead where you want the cap to end. Once you have marked the point where the ear meets the head, slide 2 fingers up inside the cap to this point as guides for your scissors and to protect your subject from being cut or poked by them. You may also want to remove the cap to cut this, but you may run the risk of tearing the cap while putting it back on. As another alternative without scissors entirely, you can also paint a circle around the ear with water and dissolve a hole in the cap in the middle of the circle with alcohol to pull the entire ear through the hole. The water will prevent the alcohol from dissolving the hole beyond that circle. Then you can adhere the cap down around the ear with more alcohol when we get to that stage. Practice this technique before doing it on the set. When trimming the ear with scissors, try to cut this out in one continuous cut as much as possible, as stray cuts can sometimes start a run in the cap, especially when under tension. This can be tricky to do and may take some practice, as you will need to lift your elbow almost vertical as you cut. If you can't, try to avoid ending your cut at the top of the ear. If you do get a stray cut and a run starts in the cap, get ahead of the run and make a T-cut perpendicular to the run to stop it. Do this for both ears to release tension on the cap. Trim off any excess cap starting below the sideburn and continuing across the forehead to the spot you made there. Next, we move to the nape, where we will begin attaching the cap. Lift the nape and apply 99% isopropyl alcohol to the nape where you want to attach the cap. Apply it in 1/2 inch swatch across the middle of the nape. Lower the cap and ask your subject to tilt their head back slightly. Then, pull the cap taut, but do not stretch the cap, and lay it into the alcohol. Hold this for at least a count of 20 seconds, time to let the alcohol do its thing. A towel can sometimes be helpful in holding this area if your hand is not wide enough. Once the nape is attached, we're going to blend off the excess. Use a camel hair brush charged with alcohol and lay it on the outside edge of the attached area. Draw it along the edge and allow the cap to dissolve there. Sometimes a little pull on the material helps the dissolve. Use more alcohol when needed. Cutting a start can sometimes help get the blend started and guide the edge as the alcohol is working. Trim off any excess for time. Apply 1 or 2 coats of liquid watermelon to the blended area, about 1/2 inch overlapping the skin and cap, to reinforce the attachment. Then dry with a blow dryer. Once dry, have your subject lower his head to the neutral position and begin applying the sides of the nape. Pull back the cap and apply alcohol from the back of the ear to where you have already attached the nape. Then pull the cap snug, but not stretched, and lay it into the alcohol. Hold for at least a count of 20 seconds. Once detached, trim off any excess if necessary. Repeat this for the opposite side. Once both sides are attached, you can begin to blend off this area just like the nape. Using your brush charged with alcohol, draw it along the outer edge of the attachment while pulling the excess away slightly with your other hand, kind of like opening a zipper. This technique leaves a somewhat ragged edge, which is easier to hide than a straight edge. Once you reach the back of the ear, you can slide your brush under the cap to attach the area behind the ear. Fold the ear forward to access this area. Using alcohol for this is much easier than using a sticky adhesive. Same protocol, press and hold to attach. Next, we will apply liquid watermelon to this edge, just as before. I prefer the inexpensive polyfoam sponge to apply this, as it gives me a stipple texture and uneven edge to the material. Apply this about 1/2 inch beyond the cap edge and 1/2 inch onto the cap. Here you can see what I call the zipper technique. As you dissolve the edge, you remove the scrap cap, just like drawing a zipper. Next, apply the liquid watermelon with the sponge. Now we move to the front. Same protocol as with the areas before. Expose the area you want to apply the alcohol to. Apply a 1/2 inch swatch of alcohol to the area you are attaching. Pull the cap snug and lay it into the alcohol. Now, in this instance, we needed to reposition the cap, so before we press and hold, we're still able to lift the cap and reposition it. Then, once it's in the final position, we press and hold for the final attachment. For the temple area, we lift the cap slightly and apply the alcohol with a brush. Press and hold. Same for the opposite side. Once down, we blend off the excess with alcohol. And finally, the ear. Fold the ear forward to access the area behind the ear. Lift the cap behind the ear and then, with a brush charged with alcohol, slide the brush under the cap and draw it along the underside of the cap to the top of the ear. Once the ear is down with the alcohol, we apply watermelon stipple to the edge, just like the other areas. This will reinforce the bond to the skin. The nice thing about stippling with watermelon is that any edge between the watermelon and the skin can be dissolved with alcohol, unlike latex, which leaves an ending line where the stipple has stopped. As we stipple the edge of the brow with watermelon, we apply it in an irregular pattern to break up any edge to the area. This area falls into his wrinkle pattern, which also helps hide the edge. In general, you want to do whatever you can to hide the edge of the appliance. Now, we stipple the rest of the appliance. For the prior areas, we used a relatively small sponge, but for large areas like this, we will be using a larger sponge to cover space more quickly. Start at the top and work your way down the head. We do this for both texture and strength. Plastic bald caps are usually smooth, so we add a stipple texture to break up the smoothness. Be careful of going over areas that may be partially dry so that you don't pick up cured clumps of the watermelon. Try to make this coat as even as possible without leaving any patterns to the stipple. Once you have a good heavy coat of watermelon on the cap, use a blow dryer to let it dry completely. Once the watermelon is dry, powder with a puff. The bald cap is applied and ready for foundation color. There are many ways to apply color to a bald cap, and we will cover applying AGPC airbrush foundation to this cap in an upcoming video. Thank you for your interest in Water-Melon bald caps. For more information, please contact us at www.michaeldavy.com or dial 1-888-225-7026.